The Fibonacci sequence in living organisms. The Fibonacci sequence is a mathematical pattern where each number is the sum of the two preceding numbers: 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, and so on. This sequence was described by Italian mathematician Leonardo Fibonacci in 1202. It's a human mathematical discovery, an abstract numerical pattern with interesting properties. But this supposedly human mathematical concept appears throughout nature with disturbing precision, in places where organisms couldn't possibly know mathematics or be following any conscious mathematical rule. Flower petals follow Fibonacci numbers with remarkable consistency. Lilies have 3 petals, buttercups have 5, delphiniums have 8, marigolds have 13, asters have 21, daisies have 34, 55, or 89. These aren't approximate numbers. Flowers consistently have exactly Fibonacci numbers of petals. Studies examining thousands of flowers found that over 90% follow Fibonacci numbers precisely. Why would flowers follow a mathematical sequence discovered by a 13th century mathematician? Flowers don't count their petals. They don't have brains capable of mathematics. Yet they grow following this precise numerical pattern as if they're reading from a mathematical textbook. The arrangement of seeds in a sunflower head follows Fibonacci spirals. If you count the spirals going clockwise and counterclockwise, you'll find Fibonacci numbers, typically 55 spirals in one direction and 89 in the other, or 89 and 144. Researchers examining sunflowers across different species, climates, and growing conditions found this pattern holds consistently. The numbers are always from the Fibonacci sequence. Pine cones show Fibonacci spirals in their scales, typically 8 spirals in one direction and 13 in the other. Pineapples show 8, 13, or 21 spirals depending on size. Cauliflower and Romanesco broccoli show Fibonacci spirals in their florid arrangement so perfectly that they look like mathematical models rather than vegetables. The branching of trees follows Fibonacci patterns. A tree trunk grows and splits into 2 branches. Each branch splits into 2 more, creating 3 branches total, then 5, then 8, then 13, following the Fibonacci sequence. Not all trees follow this pattern perfectly, but statistical analysis shows tree branching follows Fibonacci numbers far more often than random chance would predict. Leaf arrangements on stems follow Fibonacci ratios. If you trace a line from one leaf to the next leaf directly above it, rotating around the stem, the number of rotations and the number of leaves encountered typically form Fibonacci ratios. This maximizes sunlight exposure for each leaf, but the question remains: how does the plant know to follow this mathematical optimization? Scientists explain these patterns through optimal packing, the idea that Fibonacci patterns naturally emerge as the most efficient way to arrange seeds, petals, or leaves to maximize space and sunlight. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. How do plants without nervous systems or brains perform complex mathematical optimization? How do they calculate the most efficient arrangement? Research into plant development found that Fibonacci patterns emerge from the way plants grow at the cellular level. But the research showed that cells somehow measure the angles and distances of previous growth and adjust accordingly, implying plants are performing geometric calculations at a cellular level without any computational mechanism we can identify. The cells don't have rulers or protractors, yet they're measuring and calculating. The Fibonacci pattern appears too consistently across too many unrelated species to be coincidence. Plants separated by millions of years of evolution, growing in completely different environments, all follow the same mathematical sequence. A sunflower in Kansas and a pine cone in Russia both count out their spirals using the same numbers that an Italian mathematician wrote about in 1202. This suggests the Fibonacci pattern isn't just an efficient solution that evolution stumbled upon. It might be a fundamental principle woven into how biological growth operates at the most basic level. The golden ratio. In the universe. The golden ratio, approximately 1.618, is a mathematical constant that appears when you divide a line into 2 parts, so that the longer part divided by the smaller part equals the whole length divided by the longer part. Mathematicians call it phi, and it's been called the divine proportion because of its aesthetic properties and its appearance throughout art and architecture. But the golden ratio isn't just a human aesthetic preference or mathematical curiosity. It appears throughout nature in ways that suggest it's a fundamental constant woven into the structure of the universe itself. The spiral shells of nautiluses follow the golden ratio precisely. As the nautilus grows, each chamber is exactly 1.618 times larger than the previous one, creating a perfect logarithmic spiral. This isn't approximate. Measurements show the ratio holds to multiple decimal places. The nautilus shell is essentially a physical manifestation of a mathematical constant. Hurricane formations spiral according to the golden ratio. Satellite images of hurricanes show their spiral arms follow curves based on this number. Galaxy spirals do the same. The Milky Way, Andromeda, and other spiral galaxies show arms that follow golden ratio spirals with remarkable precision. Why would phenomena at vastly different scales, from a small sea creature to cosmic structures millions of light years across, follow the same mathematical ratio? What mechanism causes both hurricanes on Earth and galaxies spanning the cosmos to organize themselves according to this specific number? The golden ratio appears in human body proportions. The ratio of your height to the height of your navel approximates the golden ratio. The ratio of your shoulder width to your head width approximates it. Your fingers show this ratio between the lengths of different segments. Studies measuring thousands of people found these ratios hold across different populations, genders, and ages. DNA molecules show the golden ratio in their structure. The width of a DNA double helix divided by the distance for one complete turn equals approximately 1.618. This was discovered by analyzing DNA structure at the molecular level and calculating the geometric proportions. The molecule that carries all genetic information is built according to this mathematical constant. Animal reproduction follows Fibonacci numbers that relate to the golden ratio. Honeybees provide a clear example. Male bees have one parent, female bees have two parents. If you trace back the ancestry of a male bee, you get one parent, two grandparents, three great-grandparents, five great-great-grandparents, 8, 13, 21. Following the Fibonacci sequence. And as Fibonacci numbers get larger, the ratio between consecutive numbers approaches the golden ratio. Flower petals not only follow Fibonacci numbers, but show the golden ratio in their angular spacing. When plants grow new petals or leaves, they typically emerge at 137.5-degree angles from the previous one. This angle is derived from the golden ratio and represents optimal spacing to prevent overlap. Studies using time-lapse photography show that plants maintain this angle with precision that would require complex trigonometry to calculate. Yet, they do it without a brain. The golden ratio appears in the human face in multiple proportions. The distance from the hairline to the eyebrows, from the eyebrows to the bottom of the nose, and from the nose to the chin approximate golden ratio relationships. The width of the mouth compared to the width of the nose follows this ratio. Studies suggest humans find faces attractive when they adhere more closely to golden ratio proportions. We're somehow programmed to recognize this mathematical constant as beautiful. Perhaps most mysteriously, the golden ratio appears in quantum mechanics. It's been found in the magnetic resonance of certain atoms and in the proportions of quantum wave functions. Physicists discovered that certain quantum systems naturally organize themselves according to this ratio when reaching stable states. One astrophysicist who investigated whether the prevalence of the golden ratio in nature is real or just confirmation bias concluded that it appears far too consistently across too many different phenomena to be dismissed as coincidence or human pattern seeking. Something about the universe's fundamental structure seems to favor this specific ratio. Hexagonal patterns throughout nature. Hexagons are six-sided geometric shapes with specific angular and proportional properties. They appear throughout nature with a consistency that seems to require advanced geometric knowledge to create, yet they appear in places where no intelligence is planning their construction. Honeycombs are the most famous example. Bees construct their hives with perfect hexagonal cells that share walls with adjacent cells. The hexagons are so precise that they meet the mathematical definition: 6 sides of equal length meeting at 120-degree angles. Every cell is perfect, and thousands of cells fit together with no gaps. What's remarkable is that hexagons are mathematically proven to be the most efficient shape for this purpose. Hexagons pack together to fill a plane with no gaps while using the minimum amount of material for the maximum amount of storage space. This wasn't proven mathematically until 1999 by mathematician Thomas Hales. But bees were building perfect hexagons millions of years before humans understood geometry. How do bees without mathematical knowledge construct shapes that require advanced mathematics to prove optimal? They don't have rulers or protractors. They don't understand angles or geometry. Yet they build structures that human engineers would need detailed calculations to design. Some scientists initially argued that bees don't actively build hexagons. They build circles that naturally deform into hexagons due to the pressure of adjacent circles. But research using high-speed cameras showed this isn't true. Bees actively construct hexagonal cells from the start, working with apparent knowledge of angles and proportions that they shouldn't possess. Snowflakes form perfect hexagonal structures. Water molecules crystallizing into ice naturally form 6-sided patterns with elaborate hexagonal symmetry. Each snowflake is unique in its detailed patterns, but virtually all follow perfect hexagonal geometry. Every winter, trillions of snowflakes fall from the sky, and nearly all of them have 6 sides arranged in perfect geometric patterns. The hexagonal structure emerges from the molecular geometry of water. The way water molecules bond favors angles that create hexagons. But why does molecular bonding naturally favor angles that create one of mathematics' most efficient geometric shapes? It's as if the universe chose the most mathematically optimal bonding angle. Basalt columns form hexagonal structures when lava cools. The Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland and the Devil's Postpile in California show thousands of hexagonal rock columns formed by cooling volcanic rock. As lava cools and contracts, it fractures in patterns that create hexagonal columns, the shape that minimizes the energy of the cracking process. Again, nature is solving an optimization problem and arriving at the same geometric solution that mathematics proves optimal. The cooling rock has no intelligence, no knowledge of geometry, yet it calculates that hexagons minimize stress and fractures accordingly. The rock is doing mathematics without a brain. Saturn's North Pole has a massive hexagonal storm that has persisted for decades. The hexagon is approximately 20,000 miles wide and has clear straight edges forming a nearly perfect hexagonal shape. This geometric storm pattern was first photographed by Voyager spacecraft in 1981, and the Cassini spacecraft confirmed it still exists decades later. A massive hexagon made of swirling gases persisting in the same geometric shape for over 40 years. Fluid dynamics simulations have partially explained this. Certain combinations of wind speeds and temperatures can create polygonal patterns in rotating fluids. But why specifically a hexagon? Why not a pentagon or heptagon? And why so geometrically precise that it maintains straight edges and consistent angles, despite being made of swirling gases with no solid structure? Insect eyes are composed of thousands of hexagonal lenses packed together. Each individual visual unit is hexagonal, allowing them to pack together with maximum efficiency and no wasted space. Evolution apparently discovered the same geometric principle that mathematicians later proved optimal. Hexagons are the best way to divide a curved surface into cells. The molecular structure of graphene consists of carbon atoms arranged in perfect hexagonal lattices. This arrangement gives graphene remarkable properties. It's stronger than steel, conducts electricity efficiently, and is nearly transparent. The hexagonal arrangement of atoms creates these properties through quantum mechanical effects. The geometry at the atomic level determines the material's macroscopic properties. One science writer who studied pattern formation in nature concluded that the recurrence of hexagonal patterns across different scales and phenomena suggests that hexagons represent a fundamental geometric solution to optimization problems. But calling it optimization implies calculation and choice. What mechanism allows unconscious physical processes, cooling lava, bonding water molecules, growing bee larvae, to arrive at solutions that require sophisticated mathematics to prove optimal. Prime numbers in biological cycles. Prime numbers are integers greater than 1 that have no divisors other than 1 in themselves: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, 23, and so on. They're fundamental to mathematics and number theory, but they're abstract concepts, products of human mathematical thinking with no obvious relevance to biology. Yet some organisms have evolved life cycles based on prime numbers, and the mathematical implications are so sophisticated that scientists struggled for decades to understand why. Periodical cicadas in North America have life cycles of exactly 13 or 17 years, both prime numbers. Cicada nymphs live underground for precisely these durations before emerging en masse to reproduce. Some species follow 13-year cycles, others 17-year cycles, but they're always prime numbers. Never 12 years, never 14, never 16. Always 13 or 17. Why prime numbers specifically? Evolutionary biologists investigated this puzzle and found a mathematically elegant explanation. Prime number cycles minimize the chances of synchronizing with predators or competitors that have regular life cycles. If cicadas had a 12-year cycle, they would synchronize with predators having 2, 3, 4, or 6-year cycles, emerging when predator populations peak. A 13-year cycle only synchronizes with predators having 1 or 13-year cycles, far less likely. This is mathematical predator avoidance. But this explanation, while mathematically elegant, raises a profound question. How did evolution discover prime numbers? The evolutionary process has no mathematical knowledge. Natural selection works through random mutations and survival advantages. Yet somehow, through this blind process, cicadas evolved to follow a mathematical principle so sophisticated that humans didn't formalize prime number theory until ancient Greece. The mathematical optimization is remarkable. 13 and 17 are optimal prime choices. They're large enough to exceed most predator cycles, but small enough to be biologically feasible. Smaller primes like 7 wouldn't provide enough protection. Larger primes like 23 would make the reproductive cycle impractically long. Evolution apparently performed mathematical analysis to select the optimal prime numbers from the available options. The fact that multiple cicada species independently evolved prime number cycles suggests this isn't random chance. Different species in different regions evolved the same mathematical strategy. This implies that prime numbers aren't just human abstractions. They're features of reality that evolution can discover through natural selection. Other organisms show patterns related to prime numbers. Some bamboo species flower at intervals that involve prime number relationships. Some periodic plants follow prime number years between reproductions. The Arctic tern migrates in patterns that contain prime number periodicities in their navigation timing. One mathematical ecologist who studied cicada evolution concluded that the emergence of prime number periodicity represents one of the most striking examples of mathematical principles emerging from evolutionary processes. But calling it emergent doesn't explain how non-mathematical processes arrived at solutions that require number theory to fully understand. The cicada case suggests nature can discover sophisticated mathematical principles through evolution, but this raises philosophical questions. Is evolution somehow performing mathematical optimization in ways we don't fully understand? Are mathematical principles embedded in the universe at such a fundamental level that even random processes inevitably discover them? Some mathematicians argue that prime numbers aren't human inventions, but fundamental properties of reality that existed before humans. The cicada case supports this view. Cicadas found prime numbers through evolution without any mathematical knowledge, suggesting prime numbers are objective features of reality rather than human abstractions. If insects can evolve to use prime numbers for survival, then mathematics isn't something we invented to describe the world. Mathematics is already in the world, waiting to be discovered, by humans through conscious thought or by cicadas through millions of years of evolution. Perfect geometric shapes. In crystals, Crystals form geometric shapes with mathematical precision. Perfect cubes, octahedrons, dodecahedrons, and other geometric solids that require advanced geometry to describe and define. These aren't rough approximations. They're precise geometric shapes with flat faces meeting at exact angles, edges of specific lengths, and proportions that match mathematical ideals. Salt crystals form perfect cubes. Table salt, crystallizing from solution, creates cubes with faces meeting at precisely 90-degree angles and edges of equal length. Under microscopy, the atomic structure shows sodium and chloride ions arranged in a cubic lattice that extends throughout the crystal in perfect three-dimensional regularity. Pyrite, also known as fool's gold, forms perfect cubes and octahedrons, 8-sided figures with faces that are equilateral triangles. Some pyrite specimens show geometric shapes so perfect they look manufactured. The faces are flat, the edges straight, the angles precise. You could use a pyrite crystal to teach geometry. Quartz crystals form perfect hexagonal prisms terminated by hexagonal pyramids. The faces are smooth, the angles exact. Natural quartz crystals look like geometric models from a mathematics textbook, not like random natural formations. These geometric shapes emerge from atomic structure. Atoms arrange themselves in repeating three-dimensional patterns called crystal lattices. The external geometric shape reflects the internal geometric arrangement of atoms, continuing throughout the crystal. But why do atoms arrange themselves in geometric patterns? Why doesn't matter form randomly? The answer lies in minimizing energy. Atoms arrange themselves in patterns that minimize the overall energy of the system. But minimizing energy requires finding optimal three-dimensional arrangements, which is essentially solving geometric optimization problems. Atoms without consciousness are solving complex geometry. The mathematics becomes more sophisticated. Crystals don't just form any geometric shapes. They form shapes from a specific set of possibilities, defined by crystallographic symmetry. There are exactly 230 distinct space groups, mathematical categories describing all possible repeating three-dimensional patterns. Every crystal that has ever formed belongs to one of these 230 groups. Not 229, not 231, exactly 230, a number derived from abstract mathematical group theory. Nature produces crystals in all 230 space groups. Crystallographers have found natural examples of every mathematically possible crystal symmetry. This means nature is exploring the complete mathematical space of possible three-dimensional geometric patterns. Nature has found every single possibility that mathematics says can exist. One mathematician and crystallographer stated that the fact that natural crystals explore all 230 space groups suggests that crystal formation isn't just following physical laws, it's following mathematical laws. The universe seems to know group theory. Some crystals form quasi-periodic structures that require sophisticated mathematics to describe. Quasi-crystals, discovered in 1982, show ordered patterns that never exactly repeat, like mathematical tilings. These patterns were thought to be impossible in nature until they were discovered in metallic alloys and later in natural minerals. Quasi-crystals follow mathematical principles so complex that describing them requires advanced geometry and number theory, yet they form naturally. The atoms somehow know to arrange themselves in non-repeating but ordered patterns that mathematicians had thought were purely theoretical constructs that couldn't exist physically. Snowflakes represent another crystallographic mystery. Each snowflake is unique in its detail patterns, but all follow hexagonal symmetry. The branches grow in six-fold symmetric patterns, creating elaborate geometric designs that are different for every snowflake but always hexagonal. The mathematical question is, how do water molecules coordinate their arrangement across a growing snowflake to maintain perfect six-fold symmetry? Information about the pattern would need to somehow propagate through the crystal as it grows, ensuring all six branches maintain geometric relationships with each other. But there's no central coordinator, no blueprint, no communication system, just molecules bonding according to local forces, yet producing global geometric patterns that are mathematically perfect. Fractals in nature's patterns. Fractals are mathematical patterns that show self-similarity at different scales. The same pattern repeats whether you zoom in or out. They're defined by mathematical equations and were formally described by mathematician Benoit Mandelbrot in the 1970s. Fractals are complex mathematical objects that often require computers to generate and visualize. Yet nature produces fractals everywhere, in structures that existed billions of years before humans developed the mathematics to describe them. Coastlines are fractal. If you measure a coastline's length with a 1-mile ruler, you get one measurement. Measure with a 1-foot ruler, following smaller details, and the length increases. Measure with a 1-inch ruler, and it increases more. The coastline shows similar complexity at every scale of observation, the defining characteristic of fractals. Mandelbrot discovered this and introduced the concept of fractal dimension, a number describing how completely a fractal fills space. Coastlines typically have fractal dimensions between 1 and 2, indicating they're more complex than a simple line, but don't completely fill a plane like a solid shape. But coastlines don't know mathematics. They form through erosion, wave action, and geological processes. Yet these unconscious physical processes produce patterns that require advanced mathematics to describe. The waves don't know they're creating fractals, but they do. Mountains and terrain show fractal patterns. Whether you view terrain from satellite, aircraft, or ground level, you see similar patterns of peaks and valleys at every scale. This self-similarity is what allows computer graphics to generate realistic landscapes using fractal algorithms. Nature follows mathematical rules that can be coded. Trees are fractal. The trunk splits into branches, which split into smaller branches, which split into twigs, which split into stems holding leaves. At each level, the pattern resembles the larger structure. This self-similarity means you could look at a photograph of tree branches and not immediately know the scale. It looks similar at all magnifications. Researchers measuring thousands of trees found their branching follows mathematical rules. The angles, lengths, and numbers of branches at each level follow statistical patterns described by fractal mathematics. Trees separated by continents and millions of years of evolution follow the same fractal branching patterns. Rivers form fractal drainage networks. A river system viewed from space shows the main river fed by tributaries, which are fed by smaller streams, which are fed by smaller flows. The same branching pattern at every scale. The pattern looks similar whether you're looking at the entire Mississippi River system or a small creek with its tiny tributaries. Blood vessels in the human body form fractal networks. Arteries branch into smaller arterioles, which branch into capillaries, maintaining similar branching patterns at decreasing scales. The fractal structure is so efficient for distributing blood that engineers use the same fractal principles when designing distribution networks for everything from water systems to computer networks. Lungs show fractal branching in bronchi and airways. The branching structure maximizes surface area for gas exchange while fitting into limited space, an optimization that mathematics proves is solved efficiently by fractal geometries. Your lungs are built according to mathematical principles that maximize efficiency. Clouds exhibit fractal patterns. The boundary of a cloud shows similar complexity, whether viewed from miles away or close up. The turbulent processes that form clouds naturally generate fractal structures through the same fluid dynamics at different scales. Lightning follows fractal paths. The branching pattern of a lightning bolt shows self-similarity. The main strike branches into smaller strikes, which branch into smaller ones, creating a pattern that looks similar at every scale. Lightning is literally drawing fractal patterns in the sky as it seeks the path of least resistance through air. The fractal dimension of natural phenomena can be measured precisely. Coastlines typically measure around 1.25, mountain landscapes around 2.2, trees around 1.7. These aren't rough approximations. They're precise mathematical values that remain consistent when measuring the same type of natural structure in different locations worldwide. One mathematician specializing in fractals stated that the ubiquity of fractals in nature suggests they're not just mathematical curiosities, but fundamental patterns emerging from natural processes. but the precision with which nature produces fractal dimensions that can be measured and calculated suggests something deeper, that the universe follows mathematical principles in its most basic operations. The most disturbing aspect of natural fractals, they appear in phenomena that should have nothing in common. Coastlines formed by erosion, trees formed by biological growth, blood vessels formed by developmental biology, and lightning formed by electrical discharge all follow similar fractal mathematics. Why would completely different physical processes converge on the same mathematical patterns? What does it mean that erosion, growth, development, and electricity all speak the same mathematical language? Pi hidden in biological structures. Pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, approximately 3.14159, is one of mathematics' most famous constants. It's used in geometry, trigonometry, and throughout physics. It's a transcendental number, meaning it cannot be expressed as a simple fraction, and its decimal representation never ends or repeats. Pi should primarily appear in contexts involving circles or rotation. Yet, pi appears in biological and physical contexts that seemingly have nothing to do with circles, suggesting it's embedded in reality at a deeper level than simple geometric measurement. Rivers meander in patterns that involve pi. The ratio of a river's actual winding length to its straight-line distance from source to mouth averages close to pi. This was discovered by analyzing hundreds of rivers and measuring their sinuosity, how much they wind compared to a straight line. Rivers meander because water flowing faster on the outside of curves erodes banks, while slower water on inside curves deposits sediment. But why does this process consistently produce an average ratio close to pi? There's no obvious circle involved in river formation. The DNA double helix contains pi in its proportions. The helix makes one complete turn every 34 angstroms and measures 20 angstroms in width. When you calculate the helical path length compared to straight line distance and account for the geometry of the spiral, pi appears in the relationships. The fundamental molecule of life is built using the same constant we use to calculate circles. Pi appears in distributions of random numbers in nature. When measuring random variations in natural phenomena, like differences in leaf sizes on a tree or variations in animal populations, the statistical distributions often involve pi. The mathematical equation for a bell curve contains pi, and natural variations frequently follow these curves. But why should pi appear in statistical formulas describing random variation? It seems circular. We're using mathematics containing pi to describe nature, then finding pi in nature. Does this mean pi is fundamental to how probability and randomness work in the universe itself? Pi appears throughout quantum mechanics formulas. The fundamental equations that describe how particles behave at the quantum level contain pi in multiple places. These aren't arbitrary choices by physicists. The equations wouldn't correctly predict experimental results without pi appearing in these specific positions. Einstein's equations describing gravity and space-time curvature contain pi. The relationship between mass, energy, and the curvature of space involves this constant. This makes some intuitive sense because spherical symmetry is common in gravitational systems, but pi appears even in solutions of the equations that aren't spherical. The Mandelbrot set, a famous fractal pattern generated by iterating simple mathematical operations, has an area that involves pi in its calculation. This is strange because generating the Mandelbrot set involves no circles, just repeatedly applying a simple equation. Yet, pi emerges from calculating properties of the resulting pattern. Perhaps most mysteriously, pi appears in calculations involving fundamental constants of particle physics. The fine structure constant, a dimensionless number characterizing the strength of electromagnetic interaction, involves pi in the complex calculations that determine its precise value. Why should a property of subatomic particles involve a ratio of circle geometry? One mathematician who calculated pi to millions of digits noted that the appearance of pi in contexts unrelated to circles suggests it's more than just a geometric ratio. Pi seems to be woven into the fundamental mathematics underlying physical reality, appearing wherever certain types of mathematical relationships exist in nature. Mathematical constants in universal laws. Several mathematical constants appear throughout the laws of physics in ways that suggest they're fundamental to how the universe operates. Pi, E, Euler's number, approximately 2.718, and others. These constants appear in equations describing phenomena that seem completely unrelated, suggesting deep mathematical structures underlying all of reality. Euler's number appears throughout natural growth and decay processes. Compound interest, population growth, radioactive decay, and cooling processes all follow equations involving E. This equation describes bacterial growth, investment returns, nuclear decay, and how your coffee cools, processes that have nothing in common physically, yet all follow the same mathematical pattern involving the same constant. Euler's famous identity combines 5 fundamental mathematical constants in one equation. E raised to the power of I times pi, plus 1 equals 0. Physicists call this the most beautiful equation in mathematics because it relates these fundamental constants in a simple, elegant relationship. But these constants aren't arbitrary. They appear in natural laws, pi in wave equations, E in growth and decay, I, the imaginary unit, in quantum mechanics. That they relate through Euler's identity suggests deep connections between different aspects of physical reality. The bell curve equation, which describes countless natural variations from human heights to particle velocities, contains both pi and E. This single equation shows up everywhere in nature. Measure the heights of 1,000,000 people, plot the distribution, and you get a curve described by an equation containing both these mathematical constants. Quantum mechanics involves the imaginary unit fundamentally. The fundamental equation of quantum mechanics contains I as an essential, irreducible component. Wave functions describing particles are complex valued, involving both real and imaginary components. You cannot formulate quantum mechanics without imaginary numbers. This is philosophically strange. Imaginary numbers were invented to solve equations that had no real solutions. They involve the square root of -1, which has no real value. Yet, quantum mechanics, our most fundamental theory of physical reality, requires imaginary numbers. Does this mean imaginary numbers are somehow real? The fine structure constant is a dimensionless number that appears throughout physics, characterizing the strength of electromagnetic interaction. Physicist Wolfgang Pauli was obsessed with understanding why this constant has the specific value it does, approximately 1 divided by 137. Precise calculations of this constant involve pi, E, and complex mathematical relationships that require advanced physics to understand. The gravitational constant, speed of light, and Planck's constant appear in fundamental physics equations. These constants can be combined mathematically to produce Planck units, natural units of length, time, and mass based on universal constants. The Planck length, about 10 to the minus 35 meters, represents what physicists believe is the smallest meaningful length in the universe. That universal constants can be combined mathematically to produce physically significant quantities, suggest deep mathematical relationships woven into nature's laws. Why should abstract mathematical combinations of measured constants produce values with profound physical meaning? One cosmologist and physicist proposed that physical reality is fundamentally mathematical. He argues that the appearance of mathematical constants throughout physics isn't coincidence, but indicates that the universe is a mathematical structure. If true, mathematical patterns aren't just descriptions of nature, they are nature. Numbers and equations aren't tools we invented to understand reality. They're what reality is made of. Perfect symmetry. In natural forms. Symmetry is a mathematical property where something remains unchanged under certain transformations. Reflection, rotation, or translation. Different types of symmetry are classified by mathematics, and each type follows specific mathematical rules that can be precisely defined. Nature produces perfectly symmetrical forms that follow these mathematical symmetry principles with precision that seems impossible without conscious design. Bilateral symmetry appears throughout biology. Humans, most animals, insects, and many plants show left-right mirror symmetry. This is an approximate, Many organisms show bilateral symmetry at the molecular level, with organs and structures mirrored precisely across the body's midline. Why should organisms be symmetrical? One explanation suggests symmetry might indicate health and genetic quality, making symmetrical individuals more attractive for reproduction. But this seems circular. Why would symmetry indicate health unless there's something fundamentally important or optimal about symmetrical body plans? Radial symmetry appears in starfish, jellyfish, flowers, and other organisms. Five-fold symmetry is especially common. Starfish typically have 5 arms, many flowers have 5 petals. Sea urchins have five-fold symmetry in their internal structure. Five-fold symmetry is mathematically special. It's impossible to tile a flat surface with regular pentagons. They don't fit together perfectly like squares or hexagons. Yet nature uses five-fold symmetry extensively in living organisms, choosing a mathematically impossible tiling pattern for biological structures. Echinoderms like starfish and sea urchins show precise five-fold symmetry. Their internal organs, skeletal structure, and external form all follow 5-part organization. This symmetry is so exact that mathematical analysis reveals perfect 72-degree rotational symmetry. 360 degrees divided by 5 equals exactly 72 degrees. Crystals show specific types of symmetry defined by mathematical point groups. There are exactly 32 possible crystallographic point groups describing all possible symmetries a crystal can have. Natural crystals show all 32 types, meaning nature explores the complete mathematical space of possible crystal symmetries without missing a single one. Some organisms show chirality. They exist in left-handed and right-handed forms that are mirror images. Snail shells spiral either clockwise or counterclockwise. Most snail species spiral consistently in one direction. At the molecular level, amino acids exist in left-handed and right-handed forms. Remarkably, all life on Earth uses only left-handed amino acids. This universal preference represents a fundamental symmetry breaking. Life chose one-handedness and stuck with it. Why? No one knows, but this mathematical preference is universal across all living things. Snowflakes show 6-fold rotational symmetry. Each snowflake has 6 branches arranged at 60-degree intervals, and the patterns on opposite branches are often nearly identical, despite forming independently. This requires information about growth patterns to somehow synchronize across the entire crystal as it forms. Viruses show icosahedral symmetry, 20-sided figures that are one of the 5 platonic solids. HIV, rhinovirus, poliovirus, and many others have protein shells arranged in perfect icosahedral geometry. Icosahedral symmetry is mathematically efficient for building closed shells from repeating units. But how does a virus know to assemble its proteins in icosahedral patterns? The proteins follow local chemical bonding rules, yet they collectively produce global geometric symmetry that matches mathematical ideals. Measurements of virus capsids show they follow icosahedral geometry to within measurement error. The angles and proportions match mathematical ideals perfectly despite being built from flexible biological molecules that are moving and vibrating at body temperature. One writer, who studied patterns in nature, extensively concluded that the precision of symmetry, whether in organisms, crystals, or viruses, suggests symmetry isn't just aesthetically pleasing to humans. It represents fundamental principles of optimization and stability that govern how matter organizes itself at every scale. Logarithmic spirals everywhere. Logarithmic spirals, also called equiangular spirals, are mathematical curves that spiral outward while maintaining the same angle with respect to lines radiating from the center. They are defined by a specific equation and have unique mathematical properties that distinguish them from other spirals. These mathematical constructs appear throughout nature in precise, measurable forms that match the mathematical ideal. Nautilus shells grow in perfect logarithmic spirals. As the nautilus grows, it adds larger chambers following a spiral that maintains constant angular relationships. The mathematical equation that describes logarithmic spirals fits nautilus shells so precisely that you can't tell the difference between the biological structure and the mathematical curve. Measurements of nautilus shells confirm they follow logarithmic mathematics exactly. The way the shell grows, chamber by chamber, matches the mathematical prediction for how a logarithmic spiral expands. The constants that define the specific spiral relate to the golden ratio, connecting this pattern to another mathematical constant appearing in nature. Spiral galaxies follow logarithmic spirals in their arm patterns. The Milky Way, Andromeda, and other spiral galaxies show arms that curve according to logarithmic spiral mathematics. Astronomers can measure the spiral angle and find it remains consistent as you move outward from the galactic center, the defining mathematical property of logarithmic spirals. Why would galaxies follow this precise mathematical curve? The spirals emerge from rotating gravitational systems, but the precision with which nature produces these mathematical patterns is remarkable. Billions of stars, gas clouds, and dark matter somehow organize themselves into patterns matching equations humans discovered centuries ago. Hurricane and tornado formations spiral logarithmically. Weather satellites capture images of these storms, and mathematical analysis confirms they follow logarithmic spiral geometry. The spirals emerge from rotating fluid dynamics combined with Earth's rotation. But again, the precision of the mathematical match is striking. Spiderwebs show logarithmic spirals in their capture threads. After building a structural framework, spiders lay down sticky capture threads in a spiral pattern. Mathematical analysis of completed webs shows these spirals follow logarithmic curves. Spiders don't have sophisticated brains capable of calculating mathematical functions. They follow simple behavioral rules: move outward a certain distance, turn a certain amount, attach silk, repeat. Yet these simple rules produce mathematically precise logarithmic spirals, as if the spider is unconsciously solving differential equations. Hawks descending toward prey follow logarithmic spiral flight paths. Studies tracking hawks with GPS show they approach targets in spiraling patterns that maintain constant angles of approach. Textbook logarithmic spiral behavior. This provides optimal visual tracking while descending, but the hawk isn't consciously calculating spirals. Aloe plants and succulents arrange their leaves in logarithmic spiral patterns when viewed from above. This maximizes sunlight exposure while minimizing leaf overlap. The spiral angle relates to the golden ratio, connecting multiple mathematical constants in a single plant. Horns of rams and other animals grow in logarithmic spirals. The horns curve as they grow, maintaining consistent angular relationships throughout their length. Cross-sections taken at different points show the growth pattern follows logarithmic mathematics precisely. Ocean waves approaching beaches at angles curve into logarithmic spirals due to interactions between wave fronts and varying water depths. This creates the characteristic curved shape of waves as they approach shore. Another example of unconscious physical processes producing exact mathematical curves. A scientist who extensively documented logarithmic spirals in nature concluded that they appear so frequently that we must regard them not as arbitrary mathematical curves that happen to fit natural forms, but as fundamental growth patterns that nature follows when certain geometric constraints and growth rules apply. The logarithmic spiral has unique mathematical properties. It's the only curve that looks identical at every scale. It maintains constant angles while growing, and it represents optimal solutions to certain geometric problems. That nature produces these curves repeatedly across completely different contexts suggests these mathematical properties are being expressed through physical growth processes in ways we don't fully understand. 10 mathematical patterns appearing in nature with precision that defies simple explanation. Flowers counting out Fibonacci numbers without brains to count. The golden ratio appearing in nautilus shells and galaxy spirals separated by scales of billions. Hexagons in beehives and Saturn's atmosphere. Prime numbers protecting cicadas from predators. Crystals exploring all 230 mathematically possible symmetry groups. Fractals in trees and coastlines and blood vessels. Pi hidden in river meanders and DNA molecules. Mathematical constants woven into the fabric of physics. Perfect symmetry in viruses and snowflakes. Logarithmic spirals in shells and hurricanes. These aren't vague resemblances. They're exact mathematical relationships measurable to multiple decimal places. Nature doesn't approximately follow these patterns. It follows them with the precision of a mathematical proof. The standard explanation is optimization. Nature finds efficient solutions that happen to match mathematical ideals. But this raises more questions than answers. How do bees without mathematics build optimal hexagons? How do plants without calculators arrange seeds in Fibonacci spirals? How do rivers produce pi? How does evolution discover prime numbers? The alternative is more unsettling. Maybe mathematics isn't something humans invented. Maybe mathematics is the fundamental architecture of reality itself. Maybe the universe operates on mathematical principles so basic that patterns inevitably emerge in everything from quantum mechanics to galaxy formation. If that's true, these 10 patterns aren't coincidences. They're evidence that reality is mathematical at its core. The patterns exist because mathematics exists before physics, before chemistry, before biology. The patterns are exact because they are direct expressions of mathematical laws governing how matter and energy organize themselves. This raises the ultimate question. If the universe follows mathematical rules this precisely, where did those rules come from? Mathematical patterns either existed before the universe or they emerge with it. Either way, it means mathematics isn't just a human tool for understanding nature. It's the language that nature speaks, the code that reality runs on, the blueprint that existence follows. Nature is doing mathematics. Every flower petal, every crystal, every galaxy is solving equations and following rules defined by pure mathematics. The question isn't whether these patterns are real. We can measure them. The question is why they exist at all. Why does the universe do mathematics?